Folks, we are here. The last session of sorry, and my voice is going because we've been putting out a lot of effort and energy all day. So my apologies, but my voice is certainly slipping away, but it has been worth it. And thank you all for joining us for the second day of Canadian SME Business Magazine Small Business Expo 2022. It's been phenomenal. We've have so much knowledge that, we are absolutely going to do. We're absolutely going to produce every episode, that every panel, and we'll be sharing it with you over the coming weeks. Now, this last session today is for a workshop by the Office of the Procurement Ombudsman. It's about how to resolve issues if you're working with a federal contract. It's about helping getting back to your business and avoiding pitfalls that can happen with working with large agencies, i.e. the government. They recognize that, and that's what they're here to show you, is how to work through that process of reconciling any differences. They will review the services that they offer and as suppliers to help them resolve contracting issues that you might face as well. In a moment, we will be inviting Kelly Kilray and Marcel Inheedi from the Office of Procurement Ombudsman to deliver this workshop. Now, I want to personally thank Taha and Than. You guys have been bosses filling up that chat all day, yesterday and today. And Liz, and there's been a bunch of other people as well. So we just wanted to thank you for all your efforts on the exhibitor floor. I just want to just specifically give you guys that shout out and thank you as well. And now we'd like to invite Kelly and Marcel to the stage.
We're very, very happy to be here. So I'm Marcel Inheedi, Comms Officer at the Office of the Procurement Ombudsman. I'm here with Kelly Kilray, Senior Procurement Review Officer at the office as well. So before we start, I am going to quickly share my screen so you can have some visual support while we present. Okay. So just to give you an overview of the agenda today, so Kelly will start by telling you a little bit about who we are, our mandates, and our services so that you understand why we're here today and how we can help you. Then I will tell you about our top 10 issues, which is a list of recurring issues in federal procurements that are brought to our office's attention throughout the fiscal year. And after that, I will give you some resources that might be helpful if you are a woman, diverse, or Indigenous supplier who's doing or trying to do business with the Government of Canada. And I will also tell you about Procurement Assistance Canada, which you might know as PAC. And I will end the presentation by telling you about our town hall sessions that we host often and what they are about and why they might be of interest to you. Then, of course, the floor will be yours during the Q&A. We'll take your questions or really any comments that you might have. So without further ado, I will turn the floor over to Kelly.
Great. Thank you so much, Marcel. So to begin, who we are. What is an ombudsperson? So in the federal government context, an ombudsperson is a public official who acts as an impartial intermediary between the public and the government of Canada. So it still seems a bit complicated. So in simpler terms, it's someone who is really designed to help parties resolve issues at its most basic core. Next slide, please. So who we are, we're neutral, we're independent, and we have a government-wide mandate. So each one of those sub-bullets has a significance. With respect to neutrality, we serve multiple stakeholders, not just Canadian suppliers and not just federal government departments and agencies who actually do the buying, but there are multiple stakeholders. So it's important to understand that we don't serve one specific stakeholder. When you come to our office for assistance, you know that you'll be treated fairly and equitably. In terms of our independence, this speaks to how we operate as an office. So we work at arm's length from the department, and it's important to know how we offer our services. So even though the Procurement Ombudsman reports to Parliament through the Minister of Public Services and Procurement Canada, PSPC, the Minister herself does not have any oversight over our office's day-to-day activities, nor does she have any impact on the content of any of our reviews and reports. And lastly, with respect to our government-wide mandate, it's really important to understand that we don't just review contracts put out by PSPC, but we have a mandate for over 90 departments and agencies across all of government. And the last thing that you're going to see on this slide is actually the tagline for our office. And that was created by the first ombudsman, but it still resonates and it kind of helps to centralize how you should see us. So we're not a lobbyist for suppliers, but nor do we apologize or serve as an apologist for government. So our office comes in when you have issues or concerns, or maybe you're experiencing issues and something's not quite working right and you don't really know where to turn. That's when our office is the appropriate place to turn. Even if you don't see maybe your question fitting in neatly amongst our mandate that we'll be describing shortly, you should still come to us, and perhaps that we're able to try to resolve the issue either directly or indirectly by putting you in touch with the relevant parties within the federal government. Next slide, please. So our mandate, how can we help you? This is at a high level, and we'll get into a bit more detail in the next couple of slides, but at a high level, we can review complaints from suppliers. So you have the ability as a supplier, when you see a contract awarded and you feel that maybe something hasn't been done quite right, you can come to our office and seek services from us. You can either file a complaint or you can informally seek services to try to understand the issue or to try to understand why perhaps you weren't treated fairly. We also review procurement practices of federal departments. So the first one was a contract and you were a supplier complaining about a contract. So one supplier, one contract. With regards to reviewing procurement practices, it's slightly different. So here we're looking at more systemic issues across all of government, either within a department or multiple departments and agencies. And so if we see a practice that's repeating itself and it's something that maybe isn't in line with the policy and regulation, then that's something that we would want to look into. And it might exist within only one department or within multiple departments and agencies. And then the last one is really important as well. So we offer dispute resolution services. So what does that mean? When you actually get a federal government contract and you're delivering on that contract and something isn't going quite right and you're trying to figure out, well, how can I resolve this issue with the government? As we all know, litigation is quite expensive and time consuming, and maybe you don't necessarily want to gravitate toward that option. But what you might not know is that our office offers free mediation services. So we have in-house certified mediators that can help provide those services. So if you have a federal contract and you're experiencing those issues, you can turn to our office for those services. So as mentioned, we have subsequent slides that will speak to exactly what that means and what some of those benefits are. Next slide, please. So you heard me mention one supplier, one complaint, one contract. So this is about reviewing supplier complaints about contract award. We do have financial thresholds, but only for this one aspect of our mandate. So the contract has to be below $30,300 for goods or $121,200 for services and construction in order for us to have jurisdiction. Now, what other criteria has to be met in order for you to come to our office? So you have to be a Canadian supplier. The complaint has to be filed within the prescribed timelines. And as a rule, it's generally 30 days from the point of public notice of award. And the next one is that the contract actually has to be awarded and the value within those thresholds that I just described. So what that means is that if the contract has not yet been awarded, so they haven't decided ultimately who the successful supplier is, then we still wouldn't have the authority to launch a review at that time. So federal organization, the ones that are involved with the complaint itself, they must fall within the ombudsman's jurisdiction. But like I said, our jurisdiction is not limited to just PSPC. We have a pretty broad jurisdiction with some exceptions such as Crown corporations, the House of Commons, Senate, and some security agencies. And lastly, the CFTA is applicable except for the dollar thresholds. So this one is referring to the Canadian Free Trade Agreement, the CFTA. Now, the CFTA is ultimately where we get our jurisdiction, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in some detail, but not too much so as to overwhelm anyone. And as a quick takeaway, if you're a Canadian supplier and you bid on a federal contract below those dollar thresholds and you're not satisfied with the results, perhaps you've been disqualified or you didn't like the explanation for not winning the contract that you received from the federal organization, give us a call. Next slide, please. So what can we do? So ultimately, you bring the complaint to us in hopes that you'll get some kind of benefit. Once we do the review and we see that there is merit to the complaint, if that is the case, then the Ombudsman can award compensation up to 10% of the contract value. So you might ask, how often does the Ombudsman see merit in complaints? And truthfully, it's about 50-50 split. So every time we receive a complaint, about 50% of the time, it's determined to have merit, and about 50% we find that the department or agency did their work in accordance with the regulations and the policies in effect. Regarding full transparency, this is a big tenet of our office. So we operate in a transparent world. So the report will be published online. Of course, you may be saying to yourself, well, I'm a little concerned about my name being published online in the report. Well, we actually redact the name of the complainant to avoid that concern that any supplier may have about coming forward. And lastly, in terms of how we ensure that you do get the monies that were made as part of that recommendation, we'll follow up with the department or agency after a year to make sure that the payment has been made when recommendations for compensation have been made. Next slide, please. So the Canadian International Trade Tribunal, otherwise known as the CITT, is another entity that has jurisdiction about complaints about the award of federal contracts. So you heard me mention thresholds earlier, and the reason that those thresholds exist is because the CITT also has jurisdiction. So when the dollar value is at or above those thresholds, then you should bring your complaints to them. Now, our offices do have a memorandum of understanding between OPO as well as the CITT in order to make sure that your complaint does end up in the right spot. So if you're not sure and you contact us, but you find out that you really should have gone to the CITT, it's not a problem. So there's a box on our complaint form that you would just need to tick the box. And that says that you give us consent to share your information with the CITT. And when that's done, we do share that information and they will contact you to make sure that you understand their complaint submission process. So it is important to note that the sharing of that information from OPO to the CITT does not mean that your complaint has been filed with the CITT. So if you did want to file a complaint with them, you would need to directly follow up with the CITT through their website. Now, there are a few other things that you also do need to understand. So unlike our office, they can actually look at complaints before the contract has been awarded. So you might say, well, after the contract's been awarded, that's too late. We're not looking for compensation. We're actually wanting to deliver on that project. So here, the CITT actually does have the authority to look at complaints before contract award. So that's a really important distinction. You also heard me mention a ballpark, roughly of 30 days for our office to file a complaint. Well, it's even shorter for the CITT with respect to that complaint filing timeline. So traditionally, it's 10 days from the time at which you knew or reasonably to have known that the complaint existed. So that's really important. 10 days is not a lot of time. So as soon as you feel like that there's been some type of wrongdoing, then at that point, you need to raise the complaint. So you need to be mindful that the tribunal has powers similar to a court, so it operates a little bit more formally than our office does. They don't offer informal assistance in the way that our office will. However, again, the value of the contracts is much more significant. So if the value is significant and it's about a contract award issue, we work together, but it should go to the CITT as soon as possible. So everything that we've talked about up until now has been about a supplier bidding on a contract, not winning, and filing a complaint with our office below those dollar thresholds of $30,300 for goods and $121,200 for services and construction. So for what we're going to talk about on the next slide, forget those thresholds. We're going to now move on to talking about mediation services and much larger systemic reviews where we look at 40 contracts at a time. So for everything that we're about to talk about, there are no dollar thresholds. We could mediate contracts for 100 million, as an example. So the dollar thresholds that you saw only apply to complaints about one specific contract. Next slide, please. So on this slide that you'll see that we're talking about systemic reviews, and you heard me mention that all issues that are larger than one contract. So how we know where to launch these systemic reviews is really important for your role and what it means when you contact us. It means that it might not necessarily be a complaint about a specific contract, or perhaps you don't want to file a complaint, but you just want to air a grievance about something that you feel that a department did that they might not have done in just quite the right way. Well, we track all of that information, and that lets us know where the procurement system may not be working as it should. So the more issues that we have related to a specific part of the procurement process, that helps to guide us to know where we should launch these systemic reviews going forward. So what are the benefits of a systemic review? It actually makes the process work better for everyone. So when we do systemic reviews, what we look at is the department's procurement practices to assess fairness, openness, and transparency. So those are the three main tenets of federal procurement. But what we're really looking at is consistency with the law, policies, and guidelines. So we'll typically take 40 files and review all 40 files based on laws, policies, and guidelines. And the review, as we mentioned a few times now, can cover multiple departments and agencies simultaneously. So how do we make things better? So when we see practices that aren't necessarily aligned with the policies or the guidelines, then we'll make recommendations. But I don't want to harp just on the negative, because there are a lot of positives that come out of those reviews as well. So we do see a lot of good practices between departments and agencies, and sometimes those aren't known to other departments and agencies. So we always take great pains in our reports to make sure that we're highlighting some of those good practices so that they can be replicated. But when it is a bad practice, we will make recommendations for improvement. And we don't just make the recommendation and walk away. We'll make the recommendation, look at the management action plan, and follow up 2 to 3 years later to make sure that those identified deficiencies are actually being looked at and remedied by departments and agencies. Also, often when you see reports in the media from our office, they may refer to us as the sheriff or the watchdog, and those terms don't really do our office any services, because we want to make the process work better for everyone. So where we highlight practices may not be in accordance with, the regulations. It's important. It's important to know that it's to improve those practices. So that's really our main goal in all of the services that we provide. And I just wanted to mention as well, will be referenced later, but we do have what's called a share your thoughts option. So if you want to bring an issue to our attention anonymously, there is a link on our website called Share Your Thoughts on federal procurement, and you can give us your name and contact information if you want, and we can follow up with you for more details. But if you don't want to, you can just give us the information about something that's maybe gone on in procurement, and you can do that on an anonymous basis. So you can bring it to our attention that way as well. Next slide, please. So you heard me mention mediation. When you have a federal contract and something's not going quite right, you can get mediation from our office. But before I talk about formal mediation, you can also come to us to help de-escalate disputes. So if you have a specific issue with the department or agency and they may not be taking your calls, you can get answers to your questions that you need by coming to our office to try to help get you that information as well. So we can provide services and contact the departments and agencies to make sure that your questions are being responded to in a timely manner, and to also help facilitate that communication when necessary. So the formal is very different from the informal. So that means you're actually a party to that federal contract and something isn't working. So when you look to the dispute resolution clause in your contract, it may say, look to the dispute resolution mechanisms like mediation or arbitration, but it might not name our office specifically. But if it doesn't, you know that you still have the right to come to our office, because that is part of our legislative mandate. We offer mediation services. So like I said, it's free of charge, and really it's a win-win for you to participate in that process. It's typically very short, normally around 1 to 2 days in length. They used to be done face-to-face, but of course now in the COVID dynamic, we're doing them online, but we found them to be extremely effective as well. So we're pretty excited about how effective we are in regards to solving problems. Usually about, I want to say, a 90% rate of those suppliers that come to us seeking mediation services do find consensual resolution with the department or agency, which is a pretty high number. Next slide, please. So some of the benefits of mediation that you heard me talk about, but for those of you that may have been involved in mediation previously, you would understand as well that it's also voluntary. So you bring your request to our office and we bring that request to the department or agency. The department or agency can equally bring a request, and we would then go to that supplier to make sure that they consent to the process. So again, it's really important that we play that neutral function role as the mediator. And as I mentioned, we have internally certified mediators within our office who help provide those services. It's also fully confidential. So there is no full transparency about the conversations that happen in mediation, which is different from our reports that we write. So on the reports that are on our website, those are fully transparent, but mediation is not. Mediation is a confidential process. But as you heard me mention, it's quick and it's inexpensive. So it's a really good alternative to litigation. And in the end, if you don't like how the process is going, not a problem. You can walk away at any point. And that's what makes it so impactful, is that you ultimately have to agree to those resolutions that come up throughout that process between the parties. And we'll just help to facilitate those conversations. So to reiterate, there are no dollar thresholds here. We can mediate a contract dispute of any value. So if you are a supplier and you were successful and you obtained a government contract, but you're butting heads with the department, perhaps they're asking you to do things that are not in the terms and conditions of the contract, for an example, please give us a call and request our mediation services. But of course, the same applies if there are any federal procurement officials potentially on this call. Just know that you can also reach out to our office and request the same services. And that's it for me. Over to you, Marcel.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you. So as promised, now I am going to tell you a little bit about our top 10 issues in federal procurement. So it's a collection of what we've heard over the fiscal year. And as you heard me mention earlier, when stakeholders contact our office about an issue, so stakeholders being suppliers, business owners, or departmental representatives, or when they raise an issue at an event like this one, our intake team records the issue and then categorizes it according to the different elements of the procurement process. So the solicitation process phase, the contract award phase, and the administration of the contract phase. And at the end of the fiscal year, we compile this information into a top 10 list. So when you contact our office by phone or email, whether anonymously or not, none of your comments or feedback is lost. They matter to us, and everything is recorded to later inform this top 10 list that you see on the screen. And you may ask, what do we do with this list? So we include this list in our annual report, which is tabled in Parliament. So this way, all the concerns that stakeholders raised throughout the year make their way to decision makers, who can then be aware of these issues and implement measures to mitigate them. But we also at the office use this information to help us set the direction of our activities. So for example, we use it to establish lines of inquiries for our reviews of departmental procurement practices that Kelly mentioned. And we also use it to select topics for our knowledge deepening and sharing research studies. So for the fiscal year that just ended in March of this year, so from April 2021 to March 2022, the first recurring issue that stakeholders brought to our attention is linked to evaluation criteria, which was perceived to be unfair, overly restrictive, or biased. So here, suppliers felt like the criteria in some solicitations appeared to be tailored to favor one specific supplier, or that the criteria appeared to be overly restrictive, especially when the mandatory or rated criteria is not necessary to fulfill the requirements. So I can give you a good imaginary example to illustrate this issue. So if there are 3 pre-qualified suppliers for, let's say, a translation service, and one of these 3 suppliers happens to have a management degree. And in the solicitation, one of the mandatory criteria is to have a degree in management in addition to a degree in translation. It might look like the solicitation was drafted to specifically disqualify the 2 suppliers that don't have the management degree and favor the one supplier that has the degree. So that is a virtual and very simplified example of what we mean by evaluation criteria is perceived to be unfair, overly restrictive, or biased. In second position, we have evaluation was incorrectly conducted, or the contract was awarded to the wrong bidder. So these are instances where stakeholders felt that the evaluation was incorrectly conducted and that the contract was awarded to bidders who did not meet the requirements, or that they met all the requirements and they were not awarded the contract. The third one is that department did not respond or responded late to questions during the bid solicitation process. And as you can imagine, this is an issue because it may hinder suppliers' ability to prepare compliant bids within the required time. And in fourth position, we have that the department deviated from the terms and conditions of the contract. So this one is pretty self-explanatory and definitely an issue. And the fifth issue relates to payments. So either the department is late paying the supplier for service or good rendered, or the department refused to pay. Now, if you go back to our top 10 lists from previous fiscal years, you will see that this is an issue that comes back very often, to the point that our office released an in-depth study about it 2 years ago to really look at the root causes of the problem and understand why it happens so often and suggest ways to mitigate the problem. Because one of the reasons why businesses contract with the government of Canada is because the government is reputed to be a stable and reliant business party. So naturally, when late payments occur, it's very unpleasant. And so if that's a topic that interests you, I strongly encourage you to read our research report on the topic, and it's available on our website. And the report will provide you key insight on the issue and also ways to avoid finding yourself in this situation later down the line. So I will not go through the whole list. I will really stop at the top 5, but the list for this fiscal year will be available on our website soon. But in the meantime, you can already consult our previous annual reports and check the list from previous fiscal years. I think that you'll find it interesting to see how indeed recurring these issues are. Now, I know that all of these issues may seem overwhelming, and they might make federal procurement or doing business with the government of Canada seem complicated or complex, especially if you've never done business with the government. But, I want you to know that our office is here to support you in case you run into any of these issues while you do or try to do business with the government of Canada. And there are also several other organizations that exist to support you through the process, especially if you are a woman, a diverse, or an Indigenous supplier. And we have compiled a list of these resources. So this list is not an exhaustive one, and there are several other organizations that exist and provide procurement-related support, but we've only named a few here to get you started. So you can see on the screen, there is the Women Entrepreneurship Strategy, the Black Entrepreneurship Program, Indigenous Business Initiative, Procurement Strategy for Indigenous Business, also known as PCIB, National Aboriginal Capital Corporations Association, known as NACA, the Federation of African Canadian Economics, referred to as FACE, and Procurement Assistance Canada. So if you cannot remember all these organizations and associations I just mentioned, it's okay. You can find most of them online if you just type organizations or associations for procurement support or for entrepreneurs trying to do business with the Government of Canada. Or you can also just find them on the Government of Canada website if you go to Public Services and Procurement Canada. However, I'd like you to remember PAC, which is Procurement Assistance Canada, regardless of whether you are a woman, diverse, or Indigenous supplier or not. And I'll give you more information about PAC on the next slide. So Procurement Assistance Canada, which used to be called OSME, or Organization of Small and Medium Enterprise, so you might know them as such, but they changed their name a year or so ago. It's a branch of Public Services and Procurement Canada, so PSPC, and it was established to help businesses that want to do business with the Government of Canada better understand how the government buys goods and services, and also to help these businesses navigate the process and find contracting opportunities. So to do so, they offer seminars and webinars on how to do business with the government. And they also offer one-on-one sessions to assist you in the process. So if you have never done business with the government before and that you are unsure of how it works, of where to start, I strongly encourage you to contact them or visit their website, because it's an excellent place to start if you are new to the game. So now, before we move to the Q&A, I'd also like to mention that our office also hosts frequent town hall style sessions where we talk about our services and how we can help. So during these sessions, we provide the same information that Kelly just provided you, but in more details. And at the end, we have a discussion period. So the Procurement Ombudsman himself delivers the presentation at these sessions, and he answers your questions directly as well. And these sessions are honestly the perfect opportunity to share your experience and concerns about doing or trying to do business with the government. And also, as I said earlier, your comments and concerns are always noted, and they later inform our top 10 that I showed you a few minutes ago. So we always have two sessions, one in English et une séance en français. So you can register to the session of your choice. And our upcoming sessions are in September. So if you are interested, please send an email to the address on the screen, or you can just visit our website where the registration information will be available closer to the date. And of course, if you have any questions about the town halls or any other outreach activities that our office is involved in, you can always reach out to me and I'll be happy to answer them as well. So that concludes our presentation. We'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have. Now the floor is yours. You can talk to us here today and call us or email us later, or leave a feedback or an anonymous comment on our website, as Kelly mentioned.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Marcel and Kelly. If you guys just don't mind doing a stop share of your screen there. This is powerful because sometimes there's frustration of, hey, how do I, and why isn't there working? And sometimes people feel like there's this conspiracy, but there really isn't. And the transparency that your process is creating is phenomenal. So folks, if you're feeling like there's a big brother watching or there's something happening, there really isn't, right? And hey, look, no organization is perfect, whether it's profit, not for profit, private or public sector. No organization is perfect. But what you heard today is the effort that they're making to make things more transparent and right, and creating an equal platform for everyone involved. Thank you for sharing your contact information as well. So folks, reach out to them, get the information that you need. And if you feel that you fell into one of those 10 categories, wow, Marcel, that was detailed. If you feel that you fall into one of those categories, listen, their team is here for you. Reach out and get the support that you need, or you feel like you need. Hey, listen, even if you feel that you're not sure, why not reach out and find out? And I think that's another great purpose that this office performs. So once again, Kelly, thank you for joining us today. Marcel, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.